Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're settling in to unravel a pretty fascinating botanical mystery. We're looking at the beautiful, rewarding, and honestly, sometimes incredibly frustrating world of growing figs in cooler climates. If you've ever dreamed of plucking a soft, sweet, sun-warmed fig right from your own backyard, but you happen to live in Canada or a similarly cool northern region, well, you might think the odds are just totally stacked against you. But as we're going to see today, success is entirely possible once you understand the unique science behind how these ancient trees actually work.
It's a super common frustration, isn't it? You plant a fig tree, you nurture it all spring and summer, and by early autumn, your tree is just absolutely loaded with beautiful, plump green fruit. You wait, and then, boom, the first frost hits, the leaves drop, and those hard green figs never actually turn into the soft, sweet fruit you were promised. They just freeze and fall off. Or maybe you've noticed that one specific variety in your garden gives you an amazing early harvest, while another variety planted right next to it seems to do absolutely nothing year after year. So why does this happen? Well, to make sense of this, we really have to look closely at the biology of the fig tree itself and understand a few quirks of nature that behave very, very differently here than they do in their native habitats.
All right, part one, the biology. Breba versus main crops. So unlike an apple or a peach tree that produces one standard crop of fruit a year, most fig trees actually have the capacity to produce two completely distinct crops. The first of these is known as the Breba crop, and honestly, this is an absolutely crucial term for cooler climates. Breba figs are unique because they begin their development on last year's wood, the branches that grew during the previous summer. Because they get a head start on that old growth, they ripen quite early in the current season, which is a literal lifesaver in a short Canadian summer. Okay, let's dive into this and compare the two crops directly. While the early Breba crop grows on older wood, the second crop, which is appropriately named the main crop, grows on brand new green shoots that get pushed out during the current year. Because the tree first has to actually grow that new wood, the main crop naturally ripens much later. Now, in a hot Mediterranean climate, growers get to enjoy both. But in Canada, yeah, our autumn weather arrives way too quickly. The main crop simply runs out of time and warmth, leaving you with those frustrating, hard green figs freezing on the branch. This is exactly why understanding which crop your tree relies on is paramount. Moving right along to part two, the missing link, the fig wasp. Okay, so the short season explains why late figs don't ripen. But what about the trees that just don't produce anything edible at all? Well, that brings us to a fascinating piece of ecology. Down in warm Mediterranean regions, a tiny, highly specialized insect called the fig wasp lives inside male fig trees and actually carries pollen into the edible female figs. But here is the dramatic truth. There are absolutely no fig wasps in Canada. None. Without this tiny wasp, any fig variety that absolutely requires pollination will simply fail. It'll just drop its unripened fruit right to the ground. Because Canada and many other cooler northern regions completely lack this specific wasp, we have a major botanical hurdle to cross. Which brings us to part three, the taxonomy, 4 main fig types.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the absence of this tiny insect directly dictates which trees you can and cannot grow. Botanists generally divide figs into 4 main types, and knowing them is kind of the secret to unlocking your cold climate harvest. Let's actually look at the bottom 2 first, Capri and Smyrna. The Capri fig is essentially the male tree. Its only real job is to host the fig wasp. The Smyrna fig, on the other hand, absolutely depends on that wasp to ripen any fruit at all. Because we just established that the wasp does not exist in Canada, Smyrna and Capri figs are entirely useless for Canadian fruit production. Seriously, if you buy a Smyrna fig at a nursery, you will never, ever get a ripe fig from it in a cooler climate without that wasp. But here's the good news. That leaves us with the absolute heroes of our northern gardens, the common figs. Common figs require absolutely no pollination. Through this amazing botanical quirk, they swell, sweeten, and fully ripen their fruit entirely on their own, bypassing the missing wasp completely. This makes them the ideal, totally reliable choice for growers in cool climates. And then we have a really fascinating hybrid case, the San Pedro type. The San Pedro is unique because it kind of splits the difference. Its early Breva crop does not need pollination, so it acts like a common fig. But its late main crop does need pollination, so it acts like a Smyrna fig. Therefore, in cooler climates without the wasp, the main crop of a San Pedro will always fail and drop off the tree. However, because its early Breva crop ripens without the wasp, San Pedro varieties are still widely grown in cooler climates, specifically and exclusively to harvest that early Breva crop. All right, part 4, the solution. Choosing your Canadian fig.
So the crucial point is, we know our short summers make late main crops difficult, and the lack of the fig wasp makes certain varieties literally impossible. So you really need a strategy before you acquire a tree. Whenever you're looking at a variety for a Canadian garden, just run it through this simple three-step checklist. Step 1, is it a common fig that doesn't need the wasp? Step 2, does it have a good early ripening Breba crop as a defense against winter? And step 3, is it historically known to ripen well in cooler weather? Check these 3 boxes and you are totally set up for a highly rewarding harvest.
So now that you're armed with the underlying science, understanding the Breba crop, the main crop, and the absolutely critical role of the fig wasp, you finally have the foundation to start picking out specific trees. In our upcoming explainers, we're going to deep dive into the specific, reliable varieties that easily pass the checklist criteria we just established. We'll explore famous cold climate champions like the Desert King, which is a legendary San Pedro type, and the Chicago Hardy, an incredibly tough common fig, breaking down exactly why they behave the way they do in our northern gardens. Well, we hope this explainer has shed some light on the quiet, fascinating biology happening right in your backyard. And hey, hopefully saves you from the heartbreak of unripened fruit. Growing figs in a cooler climate definitely takes a bit of knowledge, but man, the reward of a fresh fig makes it all worthwhile. Canada Figs is all about learning the science, growing with confidence, and sharing the harvest. So, armed with this brand new knowledge about Breba crops and common figs, I leave you with this question. What variety will you grow next?